The screen flickered ominously as Emma stared at the blinking cursor, her heart pounding in her chest. Panic clawed at her throat, making it hard to breathe. The files, her files, were gone. Every single one of them. Months of relentless work, late nights fueled by coffee and determination, all erased with a few keystrokes that weren't hers. She leaned back in her chair, trying to process what she was seeing. Her desktop was empty, the folders she had meticulously organized now replaced by an eerie void. A cold knot formed in her stomach as she scrolled through the directories, hoping against hope that this was some kind of glitch. But no, it wasn't just one folder or document missing. It was everything. Years of data, projects, presentations, reports, all wiped clean. Her hands trembled as she pulled up the system logs, searching for answers. And then she saw it, a timestamp from earlier that morning, logged under a username she didn't recognize. Someone else had accessed her computer remotely. Someone had deliberately deleted her work. Emma's mind raced. Who would do something like this? Why? She glanced around the office, her eyes landing on the glass-walled corner room where her new manager, Mr. Caldwell, sat typing furiously at his desk. His sharp features and steely gaze made him seem more machine than man, but there was something about the way he carried himself, a mix of arrogance and control, that set her teeth on edge. He'd only been with the company for 3 weeks, yet he'd already managed to ruffle feathers across every department. Caldwell had walked into the office like he owned it, barking orders and demanding changes without so much as consulting anyone who actually worked there. From day one, he seemed determined to assert dominance over everyone, especially Emma. She couldn't quite put her finger on why. He was always polite enough during meetings, but there was an underlying tension whenever they interacted, a subtle current of disdain that left her uneasy. As she stared at his name flashing repeatedly in the log entries, the realization hit her like a freight train. Caldwell. It had to be him. But why? What could possibly motivate someone to sabotage her career so blatantly? Emma clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. This wasn't just about losing files, it was personal. Those documents represented more than just work, they were proof of her dedication, her growth, her value to the company. Without them, she might as well not exist here. Was that his plan? To erase her completely, make her look incompetent, force her out? She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm despite the storm raging inside her. Losing her cool wouldn't solve anything. Instead, she opened a hidden drive buried deep within her laptop storage, a place even Caldwell couldn't touch. There, safely tucked away, were copies of everything he thought he'd destroyed. Backups she'd created long before he ever set foot in the building. A small, defiant smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. He underestimated her. Big mistake. The next morning, Emma arrived at the office early, armed with a USB drive containing not only her recovered files but also evidence of Caldwell's malicious actions. She knew going directly to HR wouldn't be enough, not when Caldwell had already ingratiated himself with upper management. No, if she wanted justice, she needed to play this smart. Strategic. Her first move was to reach out to Sarah, a senior analyst who had quietly confided in her about similar suspicions regarding Caldwell's behavior. Over coffee in the break room, Emma laid out her findings, careful to keep her tone measured and professional. I don't know what his endgame is, Emma said, sliding the USB drive across the table. But I can't ignore this anymore. If we let him get away with this, who knows what he'll do next? Sarah hesitated, her fingers brushing against the sleek metal casing of the drive. You're sure about this? She asked cautiously. If you're wrong. I'm not wrong, Emma interrupted firmly. Look at the timestamps. Look at the access logs. It's all right here. After a moment of silence, Sarah nodded, slipping the drive into her pocket. All right. Let me take a look. But Emma, you need to be careful. People like him, they don't go down without a fight. Emma appreciated the warning, but caution wasn't exactly her strong suit. Not when it came to protecting herself, or others. As the day wore on, she began subtly gathering allies, sharing snippets of information with trusted colleagues while keeping the bulk of her evidence close. Each conversation added another layer to her growing web of support, strengthening her position against Caldwell. By lunchtime, rumors were swirling throughout the office. Whispers echoed in hushed tones behind closed doors, speculating about Caldwell's true intentions. Some dismissed the claims outright, unwilling to believe their new manager capable of such betrayal. Others, however, listened intently, their curiosity piqued by the mounting allegations. Meanwhile, Caldwell remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. He strutted through the halls with his usual air of superiority, barking orders and dismissing questions with curt responses. To anyone watching, he appeared untouchable, confident, in control. But Emma knew better. That afternoon, she received an email from IT requesting a meeting to discuss recent anomalies detected in the company's network activity. Her pulse quickened as she read between the lines. Clearly, word had spread beyond Sarah, and now the tech team was involved. When Emma entered the conference room later that day, she found herself face-to-face with two members of the IT department, both looking grim. One of them, a wiry man named Greg, gestured for her to sit down. "We've reviewed the logs you provided," he began, his voice low and serious. "And, well, let's just say things aren't adding up. There are traces of unauthorized access spanning multiple accounts, including yours. We're still piecing it together, but it looks like someone has been tampering with sensitive data for weeks." Emma nodded, unsurprised. "I suspected as much," she admitted. "But I didn't realize how far back it went. Do you think you can trace it back to its source?" Greg exchanged a glance with his colleague before answering. "We're working on it. But these kinds of breaches, they leave trails. Digital fingerprints, if you will. Whoever did this may have thought they covered their tracks, but we're pretty confident we can identify the perpetrator." Relief washed over Emma, though she knew the battle was far from over. Identifying Caldwell as the culprit was one thing, proving it to the higher-ups was another entirely. Still, having IT on her side gave her a significant advantage. With their expertise backing her up, she felt a renewed sense of determination. Later that evening, as the office emptied out and the hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence, Emma stayed late, poring over old project files and cross-referencing them with the stolen data Caldwell had tried to destroy. Piece by piece, she reconstructed the timeline of events, documenting each instance of sabotage with meticulous detail. By the time she finally packed up and headed home, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, but so did a fierce resolve. This wasn't just about reclaiming her work anymore. It was about exposing the truth, holding someone accountable for their actions, and ensuring that no one else suffered because of Caldwell's unchecked ambition. Whatever it took, she vowed to see this through to the end. Over the next few days, tension in the office reached a fever pitch. Conversations became guarded, alliances shifted, and paranoia seeped into every interaction. Caldwell, oblivious to the growing unrest, continued to operate as though nothing was amiss. His confidence bordered on arrogance, a stark contrast to the unease rippling through the ranks. Emma watched him closely, noting the subtle cracks beginning to form in his facade. During meetings, he snapped at employees who dared question his decisions. In emails, his tone grew increasingly terse, bordering on hostile. Even his once impeccable appearance showed signs of strain, his tie loosened, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Despite his outward bravado, Emma sensed vulnerability beneath the surface, and she intended to exploit it. Her opportunity came unexpectedly during a routine team meeting. Caldwell called everyone into the conference room, his expression unreadable as he stood at the head of the table. For several moments, he simply stared at the assembled group, letting the weight of his presence settle over them like a suffocating blanket. "Recent events have raised concerns about the integrity of our operations," he began, his voice dripping with authority. "It has come to my attention that certain individuals may have compromised sensitive company data. Rest assured, I am taking steps to address these issues and ensure accountability." Emma's blood ran cold. Was he really attempting to turn the tables, casting suspicion onto others to deflect blame? She glanced around the room, gauging reactions. Some looked confused, others fearful. But a few, those privy to her investigation, met her gaze with knowing nods. Before she could respond, Sarah spoke up, her voice steady and unwavering. "With all due respect, Mr. Caldwell, perhaps it would help if we clarified exactly what issues you're referring to. Transparency is key, after all." Caldwell's lips curled into a thin smile, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of irritation. "Transparency is indeed important, Ms. Thompson. However, I must remind you that discussing ongoing investigations prematurely could jeopardize the outcome. Suffice it to say, measures are being taken." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Emma seized the moment, leaning forward slightly in her chair. "Measures, sir? Or accusations?" she asked pointedly. "Because if we're talking about accountability, shouldn't we start with the facts? Objective evidence, rather than vague insinuations." For the briefest instant, Caldwell faltered, his composure slipping ever so slightly. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he turned away, effectively ending the discussion. "Enough. This meeting is adjourned." As the team filed out of the room, Emma lingered behind, locking eyes with Caldwell. There was no mistaking the challenge in her gaze, a silent promise that she wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. Little did he know, the real battle was just beginning. In the days that followed, Emma doubled down on her efforts, enlisting the help of additional colleagues who shared her concerns. Together, they compiled a comprehensive dossier detailing Caldwell's misconduct, complete with timestamps, screenshots, and corroborating testimonies. They even uncovered evidence suggesting he had attempted similar tactics at previous companies, further solidifying their case. But Caldwell wasn't idle either. Sensing the tide turning against him, he launched a desperate counteroffensive, spreading misinformation and sowing discord among the staff. Accusations flew left and right, creating chaos and confusion. Trust eroded rapidly, leaving many unsure of whom to believe. Through it all, Emma remained steadfast, refusing to be swayed by fear or doubt. She knew the truth would prevail eventually, if only she could hold on long enough to see it happen. And then, one fateful afternoon, everything changed. Greg from IT approached Emma's desk, his face pale but resolute. "We found something," he whispered urgently. "Something big. Meet us in the server room in 10 minutes. Heart racing, Emma grabbed her notebook and followed him, her mind racing with possibilities. Whatever Greg had discovered, it was bound to tip the scales one way or the other. As she pushed open the door to the dimly lit server room, she braced herself for whatever came next. What she didn't anticipate was the sheer magnitude of what awaited her inside. The server room buzzed softly with the hum of machinery, its sterile white walls lined with rows of blinking servers. Greg stood beside a workstation, his fingers flying across the keyboard as lines of code scrolled across the monitor. Next to him, Sarah hovered anxiously, clutching a stack of printed documents. "You need to see this," Greg said without preamble, gesturing toward the screen. On it was a complex web of metadata, tracing the digital footprint of countless unauthorized activities within the company's network. At the center of it all was a single IP address, one belonging to Caldwell's personal device. Emma's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The smoking gun. "It gets worse," Greg continued, pulling up another window. "We traced the origin of those deletions, you know, the ones targeting your files, and guess what? They lead straight back to him. Same IP, same timestamps. He didn't even bother covering his tracks properly." Sarah handed Emma the printouts, each page filled with damning evidence. Logs, screenshots, transaction records, all pointing to Caldwell as the mastermind behind not just Emma's sabotage but a broader campaign of corporate espionage aimed at undermining competitors and consolidating power within the company. "This isn't just about you anymore," Sarah said quietly. "He's been playing a dangerous game, and now it's catching up to him." Emma felt a surge of vindication mixed with dread. While the evidence was undeniable, presenting it to upper management meant stepping into uncharted territory. Caldwell had cultivated relationships with key decision-makers, earning their trust through charm and manipulation. Convincing them to turn against him wouldn't be easy. Still, she couldn't afford to hesitate. Time was running out. "Let's call a meeting," Emma declared, her voice firm despite the turmoil brewing inside her. "We'll present everything we have, the logs, the metadata, the pattern of behavior. If we want to stop him, we need to act fast." Greg and Sarah exchanged worried glances, but ultimately nodded in agreement. Together, they drafted a formal request for an emergency session with the executive board, attaching the dossier as supporting material. Within hours, the wheels were set in motion, and Emma found herself preparing for the confrontation of a lifetime. As she rehearsed her arguments late into the night, rehearsing every possible scenario in her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that Caldwell was watching her every move. His shadow loomed large, threatening to derail her plans at any moment. Yet, instead of fear, she felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about winning, it was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. The following morning, as she stepped into the boardroom, flanked by Greg and Sarah, Emma squared her shoulders and prepared to face the storm head-on. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't go down without a fight. The boardroom was eerily quiet as Emma, Greg, and Sarah took their seats at the long mahogany table. Across from them sat the executive board, their expressions unreadable masks of neutrality. Caldwell lounged confidently at the far end, his posture relaxed, his demeanor smug. He clearly believed he held all the cards. Emma swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus. This was it, the moment of truth. She glanced briefly at Greg and Sarah, drawing strength from their presence before turning her attention to the executives. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us on such short notice," she began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "What I'm about to share concerns the integrity of this company and the safety of its employees. It's critical that we address these issues immediately." Without waiting for a response, she slid the dossier across the table, allowing each member of the board to examine its contents. Murmurs rippled through the room as they flipped through the pages, their initial skepticism giving way to shock and disbelief. Caldwell shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence wavering for the first time. "This is preposterous," he interjected sharply. "These accusations are baseless and fabricated. Clearly, someone is trying to discredit me." Emma ignored him, pressing onward. "The evidence speaks for itself," she countered, her tone unwavering. "Unauthorized access logs, metadata tracing back to your personal device, patterns of behavior consistent with corporate sabotage, all of it points directly to you, Mr. Caldwell. You've been systematically manipulating company resources for personal gain, compromising sensitive data, and targeting employees who posed a threat to your agenda." One of the board members, a stern woman named Margaret, leaned forward, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Ms. Parker, are you suggesting that Mr. Caldwell orchestrated these attacks personally? That seems far-fetched." "It may sound far-fetched," Emma replied evenly, "but the facts don't lie. Allow me to walk you through the timeline." She proceeded to outline each incident in painstaking detail, connecting the dots between Caldwell's actions and their consequences. With every revelation, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier, the tension palpable. Greg chimed in, providing technical explanations to validate Emma's claims. "The metadata doesn't just suggest foul play, it proves it. We've cross-referenced multiple sources, and the results are irrefutable. Mr. Caldwell's involvement is undeniable." Sarah added her own perspective, recounting instances where Caldwell had pressured her and others into questionable practices. "He's been grooming people to cover his tracks, using intimidation and coercion to maintain control. But now, thanks to Emma's diligence, we have the proof needed to expose him." Caldwell's facade cracked further, his mask of composure slipping as he realized the gravity of the situation. Desperation crept into his voice as he tried to defend himself. "This is absurd. You're twisting facts to fit a narrative. I've done nothing wrong." But his protests fell on deaf ears. The board members exchanged wary glances, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern. Margaret tapped her pen against the table, her gaze piercing. "Mr. Caldwell, given the severity of these allegations, we'll need to conduct a thorough investigation. Until then, I suggest you step aside temporarily while we sort this out." Caldwell shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "You can't seriously entertain these lies. I've dedicated myself to this company, sacrificed everything." "Enough," Margaret interrupted, her tone final. "Your cooperation is expected, not optional. Leave the premises immediately." Defeated, Caldwell stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft rustle of papers as the board reviewed the evidence once more. Emma exhaled deeply, the weight of the past weeks lifting slightly. Though the battle wasn't over, she had struck a decisive blow. Justice might still elude her, but for the first time in what felt like forever, hope flickered faintly on the horizon. As the meeting adjourned, Emma lingered behind, watching the board members file out. Margaret paused beside her, offering a rare smile. "You've done good work, Ms. Parker. Keep fighting." Emma nodded, gratitude swelling in her chest. The road ahead remained uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone anymore. The days that followed Caldwell's suspension were a whirlwind of activity. The executive board launched a formal investigation, enlisting external auditors to comb through the company's systems and verify the evidence Emma and her team had compiled. Meanwhile, whispers of Caldwell's misdeeds spread like wildfire throughout the office, leaving his reputation in tatters. Emma found herself at the center of it all, fielding questions from colleagues who once doubted her but now looked to her as a leader. It was surreal. She hadn't sought recognition or praise, she'd simply wanted justice. Yet, the outpouring of support buoyed her spirits and reminded her why she'd fought so hard in the first place. One afternoon, Margaret approached Emma's desk, her usual stern demeanor softened by a hint of warmth. "I wanted to personally thank you," she said, setting down a folder labeled confidential. "Your courage has saved this company from potential disaster. We've confirmed everything in your report, and more." Emma blinked in surprise. "More?" Margaret nodded grimly. It seems Mr. Caldwell wasn't content with sabotaging employees. He was also funneling proprietary information to competitors in exchange for kickbacks. Had you not exposed him when you did, the damage could have been catastrophic. A chill ran down Emma's spine. She'd suspected Caldwell was dangerous, but she hadn't realized how deep his betrayal went. Still, knowing her actions had protected the company filled her with a sense of purpose she'd never felt before. "We're restructuring leadership," Margaret continued, "and we'd like you to take on a larger role moving forward. You've earned our trust, Emma. We need people like you, people who prioritize integrity over ambition." Tears pricked at the corners of Emma's eyes. For years, she'd worked tirelessly behind the scenes, often feeling overlooked and undervalued. But now, standing here with Margaret offering her a seat at the table, she finally felt seen. "I'd be honored," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the emotions swelling inside her. Weeks later, Caldwell's fate was sealed. The investigation uncovered an extensive paper trail linking him to multiple counts of fraud, corporate espionage, and abuse of power. Legal action followed swiftly, tarnishing his career beyond repair. News outlets picked up the story, painting him as a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition and corruption. At work, morale soared. With Caldwell gone, the oppressive atmosphere he'd cultivated dissipated, replaced by a renewed sense of camaraderie and collaboration. Employees began speaking openly about their experiences, sharing stories of resilience and solidarity. It was as if the entire office had taken a collective breath, exhaling years of pent-up frustration and fear. Emma thrived in her new role, spearheading initiatives to improve transparency and accountability within the company. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Soon, she became a beloved figure among her peers, admired not just for her intellect but for her unwavering commitment to doing what was right. During one particularly memorable team meeting, Sarah raised a toast in Emma's honor. "To Emma," she said, raising her coffee mug, "for reminding us that no matter how dark things get, there's always light if we're brave enough to seek it." Cheers erupted around the room, and Emma couldn't help but smile. She'd come so far, from being erased and dismissed to becoming a beacon of hope for those around her. It wasn't the journey she'd envisioned, but it was one she wouldn't trade for anything. Months later, as Emma stood on the rooftop patio overlooking the city skyline, she reflected on everything she'd overcome. The late nights, the doubts, the moments when giving up seemed easier than fighting back, they all led to this moment. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos from the office holiday party earlier that evening. Laughter lit up every frame, faces glowing with genuine joy. Her thumb paused on a group selfie featuring her, Greg, and Sarah. They looked happy, truly happy. Behind them, a banner read, "Together we rise." It was a phrase that had become the company's unofficial motto, symbolizing their shared triumph over adversity. As snowflakes began drifting lazily from the sky, Emma wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck and took a deep breath. The air smelled crisp and clean, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. She thought about the future, not just hers but everyone's, and felt a profound sense of peace. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And she knew without a shadow of a doubt that she'd earned every bit of it. With a final glance at the glittering city below, Emma turned and headed back inside, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, she'd already proven she could handle anything life threw her way. And she'd done it without losing herself in the process.